For landlords, the biggest one is maintenance. Like I know that's like the thing that people don't want to talk about the most, but it is maintenance, right? And it's not. I'm not talking about cosmetic maintenance. That's not what I'm talking about. Eventually, because I know a lot of landlords will like pull back when they hear that because they've got those tenants who just excessively ask for everything. Like if someone's complaining about a slight cut on vinyl flooring, that's not something that I would cover as maintenance, right? It's things that are like considerably damaged, like plumbing, lead issues, water leaks, etc. Like you'd be surprised. There's some landlords that just don't take care of that stuff.
Being a landlord isn't for everyone. It's important to know your rights and responsibilities and to do your due diligence during the tenant screening process. Our guest, Andrew Choubeta, sits down with us this week and shares the realities of being a landlord in Ontario and tips when managing relationships with tenants.
You're listening to the Black Wealth Effect podcast, where we're all about inspiring the next generation of Black Canadian real estate investors to succeed financially. If you're tuned in, that means you're hungry to take action and build wealth outside of your 9 to 5. We'll be sitting down with Black real estate investors, entrepreneurs, and allies to discuss a diverse set of topics to help you along your investing journey. Let's get started. You're listening to another episode of the Black Wealth Effect podcast. I'm your host, Mario, and my guest this week is Andrew Choubeta. Andrew,
Hello.
welcome. How's it going, man?
I'm good, my friend. How you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Definitely excited to have you on the show today. We have tons to cover. We know you're a rock star paralegal in the real estate field, so definitely want to pick your brain and kind of talk through the tenant landlord kind of relationship, specifically in Ontario. But we know you're also a real estate investor as well. And so we always like to get to know our guests in terms of understanding their journey, kind of going back to the beginning. And so to start, can you just share kind of like your first deal or like your first investment property?
Sure.
Where was it? Property type, investment strategy, and then any key learnings from it?
Yeah, 100%. Like first investment property was my mom's house. So like my mom could never afford a house, right? Like we lived, like I'll be transparent. I used to live in Hamilton housing way back when, right? So, after I ended up, finishing my degree, I went to university and then, got my designation afterwards. And then I started practicing in law. I was like, okay, well, you know what? We're going to change this. Like I'm going to get us from place. Me and my brother got together, bought a place. That was like sort of our real first investment. And I had a really good eye at the time. I used to work at the McKay Realty Group. I'm with KW agents a lot as well. I used to work as a secretary at the KW Complete office in here in Hamilton. And, I went through all the listings that were exclusive, coming up, or, about to be advertised, because we would see them sometimes a little bit early beforehand, because we would do the marketing packages and and then I reached out to one of the realtors there, and it was for a 3-bedroom condo and unique place in Hamilton. It's 2 stories, right? So there's 2 stories on as a apartment, and it was a 3-bedroom condo, and it was at 193. And I bought it at 193. Paid asking. I was like, this is a great steal. I'm gonna get it. Fantastic. Plus, I ain't gonna qualify for something higher than that anyway, so might as well, right?
Nice.
So I get this place, and then immediately afterwards, the market takes that huge uptick, and now they're going for about 5, 6, and I've held that property for 4 years. So I've more than doubled my return in that quick 4 years. And then after that, I started investing here in St. Hamilton's. So then I got my first real income property here. And then after that, I went overseas, did some stuff overseas as well. So I have some income properties in Africa and then here as well. So it's just sort of spanned out from Hamilton and then into Niagara Peninsula as well.
That's great. It's a fantastic story. And so you touched on it a little bit, but can you share a little bit more? Like, I'm curious, so investing in Africa, what does that look like? What sort of properties do you have out there?
It's great. It's fantastic. Like, yeah, Cape Town, I have some Airbnbs out there too inside Addis Ababa, inside Ethiopia. I also have some properties out there too. It is a completely different type of investing. Like completely, there's a lot more things to consider politically, certain types of areas that you're investing in. And in addition to that, like the stuff that I have is pretty blue chip, which is just right next to the United Nations Embassy, right over there. So I have some stuff there. And I've had a triplex there, a duplex, another single family home. And all of it is it only services Chinese nationals. So a lot of the engineers going out in that area are working on the dams. A lot of them are working on the engineering projects right now. So Ethiopia, certainly Addis Ababa, is growing quite considerably, very fast, right? And I know people sort of have an idea of that country because of the current civil issue, but it's survived thousands of civil issues and it's just going to survive again, right? And at the end of the day, they're not making any more land, right? So the investment's been going good. I have no issues as of right now. I know some people have, but I had nothing. It's been a great return for investment. The dollar stretch there is ridiculous, right? So spending, 100 grand is equivalent worth of 700, 800,000, right? You can get entire buildings placed up for 30 to 20,000, right? And Addis Ababa's pricing right now is roughly like a 2014 Hamilton. 2014, 2015 Hamilton. So it's reasonable. So you're getting reasonable rents as well. So it's really good. So your average rent over there is about $1,000 Canadian, right? And getting a great profit from that. I'm seeing $900, $700 per unit increase. So it's good. It's been fantastic. I can't say anything negative about it.
That's great. Yeah, definitely sounds like a powerful strategy out there. Definitely.
Yeah, it's been interesting. I didn't think it would work, to be honest with you, because I coming from the country, it's always had its own significant issues, even back when I was a child. But I think it was a market that I kind of knew, and it just worked out really, really well. And hopefully, after the civil issue, we'll have another 10, 20, 30 years of just peace and quiet, hopefully forever inside the country. But, as of right now, it is paying off dividends. It's great. Oh, yeah.
That's great to hear.
Have you ever considered it?
I haven't actually. So this is all new to me.
Really?
I really appreciate you sharing that. Yeah.
Yeah, no. Where are you from originally?
I'm from the GTA originally.
Originally? Okay. All right.
Yeah, my parents are from Jamaica.
Jamaica. Okay. Well, Jamaican real estate is a really big, these days, it's been going pretty well for the past couple of years. I have a friend of mine who does some Airbnbs out there as well. And he has some vacation homes and vacation rentals. So have you ever considered doing something back there, or do you have your own investments out there?
Don't have investments out there yet, but definitely on the to-do list for sure.
Right. It's going to be good fun, man. It's always great investing back in your own ancestral country. It's fantastic. And I have a lot of family back there as well. Like I was born here in Canada. I lived there a little bit and I came back. So, it's a breath of fresh air, basically. It's nice. It's really good sending back the wealth. And then, it employs a lot of my relatives there because I have companies out there too. I don't just have the real estate. I do have a couple of companies. And it's, having the ability to do that, it's been amazing. It's been great.
That's fantastic. And so we mentioned off the top, you're obviously rock star paralegal supporting real estate investors. Can you talk a little bit about why you chose that profession? Just to start.
Yeah.
And what your experience has been as well, just in Ontario.
Yeah, it's been great. It's been fantastic. I do love my job, and it has its great days and its negative days, but it's never boring. That's the big thing, right? And I went down the law school path, right? So I am designated as the paralegal. I'm still eventually going to transition to be having being my full LLB and LLM, but I always wanted to go into law, and I got into University of Toronto for law school, and I couldn't afford it. I just couldn't, right? And I got to another law school here inside Ontario. I just couldn't afford it. I was 22, 21, right? The median age for lawyers coming out of the bar, I believe, is 32. So it's not for the youth, right? It's just the barrier is so significant in cost for most young people, right? So eventually I was like, okay, well, I'm going to work in law. I'll be a paralegal because, I can practice my own matters. I can build my own business. I can do, I can work in the legal field. So I immediately went there and I found great success. It was great. So, but going into the market, I never understood why the market never took a stance like I did. I came from real estate investing and real estate too. I was working on a lot of I was watching people break broker deals every day, right? I work very close with real estate agents. And I was sitting back and I just sort of looked at it and went, there's a huge hole that's like not being plugged. Like every person that should know about that type of representative doesn't know about that type of representative, right? A very cost effective, limited scope of practice that's predominantly only working in one specific area, right? So lawyers will work in general practice, etc. But when they eventually specialize, it happens to be the same thing. But most lawyers still jump in between multiple different types of practice areas. I went in directly only with landlord and tenant, and I work even specific to more of that. I work with investors predominantly for ROI, for N13s, for N12s, etc. So I worked in a specific type of application type, right? So it went even deeper than that, and it's been I haven't really found that many representatives doing the same thing. It's a very niche type of work, and it's been paying off dividends. And the idea is that I would eventually finish off my license and continue on to do more investments and et cetera, et cetera. So it was just the natural growth towards what the final end goal. But the ultimate goal is just retiring when I'm 40 and with 10 or 15 income properties and just doing that. That's probably the goal at the end of it.
That's fantastic. And kudos to you uncovering that opportunity in that niche, as you mentioned. And I know you're doing big things and supporting investors. So,
awesome. Yeah. Like, it's been an interesting ride. Like, when I went into it, I thought, okay, I'm just going to do everything that no one wants to do. Right. So when, the worst of the tenants, I was being referred them by other representatives. Right. I got a lot of that. And I started actually going to the properties and talking to the tenants, where a lot of, I thought that, a lot of lawyers weren't doing that. A lot of representatives, paralegals, et cetera, they weren't doing that. They were sitting in their offices, sending out paperwork, and I would actually go and talk to people, right? Mm-hmm. And I've been thrown at, chased at. I've had machetes pulled on me, crossbows. I had someone try to just throw a rock through my window, right? Like I've gotten everything. I have had tenants that have had cougars inside their property, like full on, like 200, 300 pound mountain lions inside their property, inside their 2-story walk up inside in Toronto on the lakeshore. Like I've seen, like there's stories upon stories. It's always been interesting. Like that lady that had her cougar, she was actually a stripper, and she would use the cougar on stage, right? So that's like her stage gimmick was, right? Yeah, right. And of course, for obvious reasons, the condo board was really upset about that after learning that this lady had this inside the condo. And they, of course, moved on the owner, who was the landlord, was renting it out. And he was stuck between a rock and a hard place, trying to hold the condo at bay. Meanwhile, this lady has this animal designated as a support animal, right? So he's trying to deal with that and ultimately get her removed from the building. So it's never a bizarre day, man. I had someone burn a house down because they were deep frying a banana, like in one of those George Foreman deep fryers. They have stuck it in there, and it lit up half of the building. Luckily, no one was injured. It's great to laugh at now, but like, you could have killed someone, right?
Wow.
So I've had people barbecuing on the 3rd floor, and you have to deal with it by sending them notice. You get them out. Yeah, it's people have done. This guy shot a crossbow like between 2 floors of an apartment building. It's good. It's great, man. It's fantastic. Wow. I'm never sitting there like, tax law. It's never the case. It's always something delicious. It's great.
Truly never a dull moment, it sounds like. Yeah. So definitely a lot to unpack there. I'm gonna I think we're gonna go back to I think the key there is due diligence, right? So would love to pick your brain on that topic in a moment. Mm-hmm. But I think it's a perfect segue to just talk about the kind of landlord and tenant dynamic, which is always a hot topic amongst investors in Ontario.
Yeah.
Can you talk just a little bit about what are some of the key responsibilities on both sides that we should be mindful of?
So for landlords, the biggest one is maintenance. Like I know that's like the thing that people don't want to talk about the most, but it is maintenance, right? And it's not, I'm not talking about cosmetic maintenance. That's not what I'm talking about. Eventually, because I know a lot of landlords will like pull back when they hear that, because they've got those tenants who just excessively ask for everything. Like if someone's complaining about a slight cut on vinyl flooring, that's not something that I would cover as maintenance, right? It's things that are like, considerably damaged, like plumbing, lead issues, water leaks, etc. Like, you'd be surprised. There's some landlords that just don't take care of that stuff. And that's for the board and for tenants as well. It's a pretty big issue, right? So that's where you see a lot of contention at these days on. And then now I would say now it's trumping that a little bit is all the investors that have now gone into real estate, doing M13s, M12s, et cetera. And you see the constant turnover. So before you would see gentrification a little bit slower. Now, like you've got, one or two large scale investors that buy up streets, or the same capital fund doing the one next door. That guy's doing this one, that one. And you just see the rotation of tenants just running around. So you see a lot of contention going about those subjects. So that turns into our work, right? So we're starting to see that trend through every application, right? So it's a lot of T2s from tenants, T6s, and then M13s and M12s from landlords, which are, removals for sale, removal for move-in, and removal for renovations. And on the other side of the tenants, it's bad faith for an application that has been done illegally or lied about, etc. And then T2s for tenants' rights. So you start to see that spin. So a lot of people are having some contention on that, right? And screening your tenant is extremely important because of that, right? So now you see landlords as a basic landlord, you should be taking a void check, right? If you're doing deposit, etc. You should, if you have someone driving a car that's, parking inside the parking spot designated within like a complex or even a singular car drive, you should have their plates and the make and model of the car. Right. And you should be doing a credit check them up on McKinley as well to see if they've ever been, with the landlord and tenant board, anything like that as well. But people don't even do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that you touched on that because that kind of goes to my point just around like that due diligence that investors should follow to avoid situations like the ones that you've shared so far, right?
Yeah, you can pick who you're paying. You can pay for a lawyer or pay for a paralegal, or you can, save that $2,000 and just, do the right thing in the beginning, put them through front lobby, pay for some services because that one person could destroy your entire house. It's like I always try to tell every investor because it's like the biggest thing I hear is like sympathy. We're like, I rented them because they seem nice and they had kids. It's like, did you check that they had a credit score? Did you check that they didn't get evicted from the last place? Did you check that? It's like, well, they don't, right? Because they see the one thing and they jump on that. Like, if you felt bad for someone, 90% of people would not give them their car keys and be like, and then just drive off, you'll be okay, right? And then you can bring it back in the weekends. They wouldn't do that, but you're doing that with a building, right? You're giving keys to someone, right? It's just like, I never got it, but people, they still do that. So they end up, coming over to my office afterwards when that's the case, right? So.
Yeah, that's a great point. Like there is, like obviously in real estate and in business, like there is that, like you're dealing with people at the end of the day. So there are emotions, there are relationships, but to your point, like it's a business, right? And so you need to treat it as such, and due diligence is extremely important to avoid situations like that.
Yeah. And, running like a business is important too. And even if you have one, like it doesn't matter what it is, if it's 1 unit or 2 units or 300, it's a business, right? You have to make sure your ROI is there. Otherwise, like a lot of people look at, that caricature evil, landlord with the Scrooge McDuck type of thing. And that's what they think it is. It's just not the case. Like most people are like retirees. They're in their 80s, 70s. They have this granny suite. They rent it out, right? It happens a lot. Are there large scale guys that do 200 units? Oh yeah, there are. But I've never been in those meetings seeing someone twirl their mustache, right? That's just not the case. Like a lot of them are very high driven young individuals, right? And older individuals sometimes. And they're looking to build wealth, generational wealth. They're, and not only that, they're willing to, looking to provide for their families as well, right? And people just don't see that. They just rather see something else, and it's a shame. But it's just, it is what it is sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. In terms of so from a landlord perspective, like a common strategy when dealing with challenging tenants is cash for keys. Can you talk a little bit about like what that is at a high level, and like what are some of the key considerations an investor should make if they're considering that?
Yeah. So, cash for keys is a term that I don't like to use too much anymore because it doesn't really give an accurate representation of what that agreement is, right? So, I know, okay, so every landlord sort of knows, you can get an agreement, get it signed, give the tenant money, out the door they go, right? Mutual agreement, you guys pick the date, just sign some paperwork. Now, nowadays, since people have started to do that more and more often with M13s and renovations and increasing your ROI on properties, tenants are being sort of wise to this, and now you're getting a lot of performance-based negotiation, right? Which is, I give you key, and then I get cash, right? That's sort of how the end of the scale is. But the reason why that's usually a negative is because you get inflated numbers like $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, $100,000, etc. Now, a lot more people are deciding to these days, and I told most landlords that come and consult with my firm, you serve and file your application, and then from there, you actually go forward with a settlement, right? So it's the same paperwork. It's an N11, but now it actually has some weight to what you're doing. And most people just forego filing their applications and serving their notices, and then trying to run to the end, and they give it an 11. They go, well, you know what? I don't understand. He asked me for $100,000. It's like, well, I would. Let's be honest. It's like you're asking me to leave for like no reason. $100,000. Doesn't matter to me. You're not telling me to leave. That's the big thing. You're not telling me to leave. You've just suggested it. It's like, well, I don't want to suggest it, right? So, doing things correctly in the first place is usually the reason why the people come over to our office typically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so for the listeners that like have never gone through the process, or maybe like they're a newer investor, can you talk about kind of the like what is the average kind of process for like getting a tenant out of a unit? I know you mentioned like the N11 as an example, but like just kind of start to finish, and what are timelines most importantly looking like today in Ontario?
Yeah, so your lower end numbers, like your N1s, N2s, etc., they're taking a very long time, and then those are for rental increases, etc. And then N4s typically are a little bit faster. Those are your non-payment of rent for obvious reasons, right? You have someone with a significant loss. And then from there, under that, I would say it's the N12s, the N13s, which is people moving into properties, selling property, and then your renovations. So to say that it's going at a snail's pace would be an understatement. It takes in some areas, like a year to get to the board. That's how long it takes, right? And it's never fun at the end of it as well, because it's difficult hearings. They're very, 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 very difficult these days, right? Especially with the complexity of the law. And not only that, adjudicators can make up their own decisions, right? They have a lot of leeway on how to make and assess documentation and tax being brought forward, right? So they have overreaching power. They have significant reach of power, right? And, a lot of landlords don't know their bread and butter, which is the Residential Tenancies Act. And they should very much learn it, because I would recommend every investor just sit into the landlord tenant board, because the reality is you're going to be there. There's no possibility that you're not. Something will eventually happen. It's the nature of the beast. The more units you own, the more it's going to happen, right? If you have owned one property and you only plan on owning one property, maybe you'll have one issue in 20 years, right? But if you own more than 5, you're going to see yourself inside the board at least once a year, right? And it's like for the hearing blocks in Toronto that are non-payment of rent, it's like 80 matters being heard each hearing room, and there's Zoom hearing rooms. So you get in, there's like 200 participants, right? There's one judge or adjudicator, or sometimes there's 2, depending on which scenario it is, which district. And then you go into tenant duty counsel room, you've got other rooms, and you just hear the hearings, and they go in, and you could be there all day, right? And the adjudicator gets to all the matters, right? So it's a lot. It's like the People's Court, right? If you've seen it online or
I've seen on TV.
Yeah, like it's honestly like that. Inside Toronto, like they literally have like the pull numbers. You pull it down like in a meat factory, like where you're buying meat. Then you pull a number to go speak with duty. It's a lot. It's a lot, and it's emotion and yelling sometimes, and it's good fun. It's not like your traditional, like when people think court, they think like small claims court, civil court. It's not like that. This is completely different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like you mentioned the like RTA, like are there any additional resources like available to landlords or tools out there that should be considered?
Yeah. So I don't know why people don't look at the most, but it's Canly, which is what every legal profession knows. It's the database for all case law inside Ontario and abroad. And the largest resource for most of us use. Basically, is what I'm trying to say. And people don't check their tenants in there, right? They don't look at new cases that are coming out that are prominent, right? And they should, right? I know there was that unfortunate death of I think it was a child in Toronto from the air conditioner that was inside a housing unit, and they had an air conditioner on the 30th floor that wasn't pinned correctly, and it fell and it landed on a stroller. As soon as that happened, within a week, 2 weeks, the standards changed on how you would place your air conditioner within your apartment building. And that sweeps right into the landlord tenant board. It was like overnight, bang, everyone knew about it, right? Because of this incident, right? And you wouldn't know if you were a landlord not looking at the landlordhelp.com. There's a lot of resources online that are available. The Ontario Landlords Association, Solo also exists as well. There's a lot of groups that people should be a part of, and investors, right? So not just your Grant Cardone and Tony Robbins Facebook group. Like it's not just that. You also have to know, like this is like the gritty stuff that people have to be aware of, because it's just, you can't be a good landlord without being, how to protect yourself, right? And support how to do that. And the rights of your tenants and rights of yourself as well, right? And keeping within those rights. So every landlord should get educated on that.
That's great. Knowledge is power, and it's definitely a requirement in order to be successful, to your point, as an investor.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like it's been great because investing is a little bit easier with me because I know all the words out of the cereal box, right? So I've read the fine print, but in theory, like the principles are all pretty simple, right? So you can spend your 10 or 15 hours on the subject and get very knowledgeable very quickly. Right, enough to handle the everyday today question from a tenant or issue that you may be dealing with, or you may not have the time to talk with a lawyer or wish to. Right? You can get pretty good with that. The landlord tenant board law is written for the layman usually.
Mm-hmm. And actually, on that note, like, do the laws vary, like depending on where you are, like outside of Ontario?
Municipal laws for sure. Those can affect when you're inside the tribunal as well. They're very prominent, but no, it's usually just the Residential Tenancies Act. So it prevails it goes through all of Ontario, right? So usually speaking, I don't handle things in like Manitoba or Alberta or anything like that, but it's typically just the Residential Tenancies Act. If I was telling anyone to check into landlord investing, they'd be the main one to recommend.
Mm-hmm. It's awesome. Definitely lots of food for thought. I appreciate you sharing that. So like with the current market, obviously like interest rates going up, cost of living going up, like how do you kind of foresee I think it's a bit of a difficult question, but like how do you foresee the relationship between landlords and tenants like in the next few years, kind of based on where we're at today in Ontario?
This is where you say the political answer versus the realistic answer. Like the political answer is, everyone is, it's gonna be a difficult time and everyone will grow together. And the reality is it's gonna get worse. I really do think it will. Right. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of hard stances that people take. They're hard, right? And there's a lot of capital driven companies that move forward, these are not your average investor. This is like billions of dollars being placed in, like Blackthorn, etc. Right? There's a lot of companies that are moving into the real estate market and gentrifying very quickly, right? And they do it en masse, right? So there's that, and then you have on the left side, you have that very hard tenant movement that's coming in, right? And it's organized. I would say Hamilton right now, you just can't serve N13s anymore and not expect a response from them, Like, there's prominent groups all over Hamilton. So it's not, yeah, I would say some pockets of Toronto are easier to work in as a landlord when you're trying to renovate. But if you're in Hamilton, it's very difficult. So and there's more groups popping up every 10 to 15 days. I do think it'll get a lot harder, a lot more difficult to find your deal. Tenants are disrupting that quite considerably these days. And, for a lot of good reasons and a lot of bad reasons, right? So it's pretty even keel, right? So, I think it's going to get a lot worse, to be honest with you.
Yeah. And it's a bit of a harsh reality, but it is the reality. And I'd say, like, as an investor, it's important to be informed on top of these trends, what's going on in your market, and really just be educated, right? And work with rockstar professionals such as yourself to ultimately still hit those investment goals and objectives despite what's going on.
Absolutely. Certainly talking to another representative, talking to another paralegal, another lawyer. You want to have a few contacts, right? So you should have a real estate lawyer. You should have your paralegal. You should have a team around you. Same way you would have your accountant or mortgage broker, insurance. It's important to have that there because the resource is going to be honestly necessary. Just working in the field, for sure.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for sharing these tips, insights, and resources for our listeners, Andrew. Before I let you go, can you just share, like, from a real estate perspective, like, what's next for Andrew?
No.
And then what's the best way for our listeners to reach out to you?
So you can reach me at my office, Caveat LLP. My partners, Glenn Gosling and Angela Smith. And so we're at 289-339-1311. And you can just look it up on Google or on Facebook, etc., and you can find us. Now for what's next for Andrew. In the immediate, I'm probably going to go home and take a nice, long, hot shower. I've been wanting to get home a bit. Or, like the alternative, I'm planning actually on going after one of the larger real estate deals I've ever done. So it's a 30 unit that I'm trying to go after right now. And that I'm trying to close that up and see if I can get it to work. So yeah, that's the next big thing for Andrew in the near future.
That's fantastic. Upwards and onwards.
Yeah, sure.
Well, thanks so much for taking the time, Andrew. Really appreciate it. To our listeners, thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Black Wealth Effect podcast. We'll catch you later. What was the one thing you heard today that inspires you to take action? Now plan to take that action in the next 24 hours. If you're looking for more support, ideas, or just want to connect with others like you taking action, join us in the Black Wealth Effect Facebook group. The link is in the show notes. Thank you for listening, and we'll catch you next time on the Black Wealth Effect podcast.